welcome to the first episode of the Late Round Sleeper Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Matt, also known as the GM, along with my co-host, Josh. What is up, Jay?
How's it going, fellas? How we doing? Everything's going
doing
good?
Just fine. An exciting Week 7 of NFL football. But first, Late Round Sleeper, who are we? Well, the Late Round Sleeper Fantasy Football Podcast is a bi-weekly podcast that will be covering all topics that are relevant to fantasy football. You can also follow us on Twitter at LateRDSleeper. That is Late Round Sleeper, where we answer any and all fantasy football questions. Why? Because we love fantasy football. We love to hate it. But to me, fantasy football makes watching NFL on Sundays a lot more interesting, because sometimes you actually care about games like Cardinals versus Jaguars because it means something to you. You know, Jay?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Even though you have those rough NFL matchups, you still care about your fantasy players, and it makes everything a lot more interesting.
That is correct. So Josh and I are in a league called the Weekend Warrior Fantasy Football League. Josh is a former champion 2 years ago, I believe, and I am a year after year first round exit, unfortunately, but I'm trying to change that this season. So we're just going to go ahead and get into our Week 7 recap. A lot of action in Week 7 of the NFL. We had a lot of good games and a lot of marquee matchups. The first one was our Thursday night game, Seahawks versus Cardinals. Seahawks won 34-22 over the Cardinals, and Russell Wilson is becoming somewhat of a relevant fantasy player. Had 235 yards through the air and 3 touchdowns. Josh, is Russell Wilson becoming a fantasy asset for players out there?
You know, I believe so. I mean, he's not going to be a top 10 guy consistently, but I believe he's going to be a top 15 quarterback. I mean, which is still essential in starting, worthy of a starting quarterback in pretty much in all leagues.
And also, not too much to mention about this game. Marshawn Lynch, 91 yards and 1 touchdown. He's pretty much matchup proof. The guy plays well against almost everyone, so you're starting him every week. Then we move into Cowboys-Eagles. This was supposed to be a shootout. What happened in this game? Tony Romo, 317 yards, 1 touchdown. Josh, Romo really hasn't played very well the past couple weeks. What's going on with him?
Yeah, I know. It's hard to explain, because he completely went off in against the Broncos,
yep.
2 weeks ago, and he put up an abysmal 9 fantasy points 2 weeks ago, and
yeah, he did.
Even this past week, he throws through 2 interceptions, 1 touchdown. I mean, passing yards was Romo-esque, but I mean, gosh, you got to ask more for a quarterback like that.
Yeah, but Des Bryant continues to get his 110 yards, 8 catches. You were starting Des Bryant every week. So moving on, Texans versus Chiefs. Actually, what most people thought was going to be an easily won game by the Chiefs turned out to be a pretty decent game. Case Keenum came in and he played pretty well. What do you think?
He played pretty well, despite the defense, actually probably the number 1 defense in the NFL as to date. For a rookie.
Josh, hate to cut you off there, but do you think Case Keenum is actually a guy that's going to have some fantasy impact going forward this season?
I don't think so personally, just because of the quarterback situation. Even Matt Schaub is a questionable fantasy player right now, so I do not think so going forward.
Yeah, well, Andre Johnson finished with 8 points in ESPN Standard Leagues, had 89 yards and 4 catches. I don't know how much the Case Keenum starting job is going to affect him and other receivers on the Texans, but we'll just have to see going forward. Moving on to the Buccaneers versus Falcons, Matt Ryan put up a great day, had 3 TDs. Matt Ryan is pretty much a guy you're going to start every single week, despite Roddy White being out, despite Julio Jones being out. Matt Ryan is legit. And then also on the Buccaneers side of the ball, Doug Martin, Josh, continues to struggle and kill fantasy owners. Doug Martin is not a guy that you have been able to trust this season, and now he's also hurt with his torn labrum. So we'll see about his status going forward. Bengals and Lions, a big day for your boy, Megatron, Josh.
Yeah, it was a huge day. I I traded Darren Sproles for him in one of my other leagues, and
right. That was a steal, by the way.
an absolute steal.
Yes.
And he goes off, and he looks like he's returned to his normal Megatron self.
Yes, and for most fantasy owners that own the running backs of the Bengals, they had a rough day. Gio Bernard, only 27 yards on the ground, and Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, just an abysmal performance, but they should bounce back. But a guy like Bernard is so talented, and he's a dual threat, so he catches passes out of the backfield. So personally, I think Bernard is a little bit more valuable in terms of fantasy because he does catch passes, but Green Ellis is the goal line guy, so he does have some value. Bills Dolphins. Not too much to say about this game, Josh. Ryan Tannehill, 3 TDs. Mike Wallace had 76 yards through the air, but not really too much fantasy relevance. CJ Spiller continues to struggle.
Other than Freddie Jackson. I'm sorry to cut you off there. Freddie Jackson did put up some decent numbers for sure.
Yeah, Jackson, 36 yards and a TD. I think he's been the better Bills running back this season, and I think going forward, I think he's the guy to own if you want to take a Bills running back. Jets Patriots. The Jets pull up the upset against Tom Brady, who's really struggled. Josh, what is your opinion on Tom Brady's fantasy value rest of the season?
Well, he just got Gronk back, so
Gronk finished with 114 yards, so he had a good game, and he looks like he's going to be a legitimate guy going forward. But as far as Brady, he just didn't get the job done.
No, he did. From a fantasy perspective, he's killing owners week to week, and I don't know if it's going to improve any. I mean, Gronk is going to, he's going to add some value to Tom Brady, but I mean, he's got to get some more additional weapons to really boost his value.
Right. And then maybe a guy like Josh Gordon, who has some trade rumors surrounding him, maybe that'll be a landing spot for him. We can only hope. Bears Redskins, RG3 returns to his stud status, had 2 touchdowns, and looks like he's getting more comfortable scrambling out of the pocket. Matt Forte with a big game, 3 TDs, 91 yards. That's a guy you're starting every week. But Josh, Jay Cutler went down in this game. How do you think his injury affects guys like Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey?
I think personally, from my point of view, Brandon Marshall is going to get his regardless of who the quarterback is. Now, granted that, Josh McCown, I think he's going to be a decent backup. But Alshon Jeffrey, I really think it's going to have an impact on Alshon Jeffrey, second receiver on that team. And, the quarterbacks are always going to look Brandon Marshall's way.
Right. Okay, moving to the Rams-Panthers game. Panthers have a legit defense ranked in the top 3 in the NFL. Sam Bradford goes down, but I don't know how much impact that has for the weapons of the Rams. I think the only guy worth owning on the Rams is Zach Stacy, a guy that you have in our Weekend Warriors League. And then for the Panthers, Cam Newton had a good NFL day, not really a good fantasy day. Josh, would you be comfortable starting Cam Newton every week despite matchups?
No. I'm a fan of the Panthers, and I love Cam Newton to death.
Right.
But from a fantasy perspective, I wouldn't feel comfortable starting him week to week.
Right. But your boy Steve Smith did get 69 yards and a touchdown. He's kind of hit or miss every single week. A fantasy whack-a-mole, if you will, Steve Smith. Chargers, Jaguars, this is the game against a good team versus, not so good of a team. Phillip Rivers had a decent day, and my boy Ryan Matthews with his second straight 100-yard day, 110 yards, 1 touchdown. The 2 backfield runners for the Chargers, Ryan Matthews and Danny Woodhead, they are both fantasy assets. So Josh, who do you think is the more valuable San Diego running back going forward rest of the season, Matthews or Woodhead?
Given Matthews' durability, I just believe in Danny Woodhead a little more than Ryan Matthews. I don't know if you can trust in a guy in Matthews to get you a consistent 100-yard game every week. It looks like they're utilizing Danny Woodhead for you PPR folks out there. They're utilizing Danny Woodhead a lot more in the passing game. So I just think Danny Woodhead's the best option.
Yeah. And then Maurice Jones-Drew is, he's pretty much irrelevant in terms of fantasy this year. 9 carries, 37 yards. That's a guy that you can sell for 5 cents on the dollar. Just get anything you can for him because he's a lost cause. 49ers, Titans. a good game for Colin Kaepernick and Frank Gore, 70 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then Jake Locker is actually proving to be a pretty good fantasy quarterback. And then Chris Johnson, where did that come from? Catches a 60-yard pass from Jake Locker. That really killed me this week. But Chris Johnson, I don't know about you, Josh, but that's a guy that I cannot trust regardless of who he's playing. What do you think?
I cannot trust my life. I still refer to him as CJ0K, regardless of what kind of stats he puts up.
Or CJ 2 yards per carry, CJ2Y PC. Browns Packers, Brandon Weeden is a terrible NFL quarterback. I don't know what he's doing in the league. Josh Gordon suffered from that. Jordan Cameron, good game, and Aaron Rodgers continues to prove why he is one of the best fantasy quarterbacks. Ravens Steelers. Not too much to say about this game besides Ray Rice is just not getting the job done this year. And Le'Veon Bell is actually proving to be someone that's worth maybe a low end 2, maybe a flex guy, Jay?
I'd say more of a flex guy. Your low end 2s are always gonna get you at least, maybe 10 to 15 around that range, 10 to 12, but definitely a flex play.
Yes, and then on Monday night, Broncos and Colts, the Peyton Manning versus Andrew Luck show with Andrew Luck prevailing. Peyton Manning and Luck both had great fantasy days, but as far as the Colts running back situation, Trent Richardson is a mess, and now Donald Brown is getting carries late in the fourth quarter. Would you be worried if you're a Richardson owner?
Richardson, he was projected to be a top 10 back at the beginning of the season, and he is not proving yet to date that he is worthy of that. Just terrible.
I'm beginning to wonder if he's actually a good football player, but I'm going to go ahead and reserve judgment until I see more from him.
Yes.
And then obviously we had the Monday night game, Vikings-Giants. Well, I don't know what to say about this besides this game was ugly, and Josh Freeman is absolutely pathetically terrible. All right. I don't even want to spend time talking about this game because Josh Freeman disgusts me. Okay. All right. So let's get into some of the Week 7 injuries we had this week. Unfortunately, Josh, one of our favorite players, Reggie Wayne, goes down ACL injury. How does that impact Andrew Luck going forward?
Oh gosh, he's been the most targeted receiver throughout this season and a half that he spent with Luck. And I know from personally this is going to impact my fantasy team because I'm a Reggie Wayne owner, unfortunately. So. It's going to have a huge impact on that offense.
Yeah, and then we have Doug Martin, who suffered a torn labrum, and I've heard reports that he's going to miss the rest of the year, but then I hear a possibility that he could return. But either way, Doug Martin has not been a good fantasy football player this year, so that is that. So Arian Foster and Ben Tate both suffered injuries. I don't know what to make of this, Josh, besides the fact that Foster has been okay, and Ben Tate would be a decent play if Foster were to miss, but now he has a rib injury. I really don't know the status of Foster, but he is the guy you want, but Tate is also a nice fill-in if he does miss. And, of course, a very scary injury for the Packers, Jermichael Finley, with a spinal cord injury. That was terrible, Jay.
Oh, yes. It just looked just watching the game and seeing the highlight of it, it looked gruesome, and I pray and hope that he's okay and he recovers.
Yeah, but I did see a video on Twitter of him walking out of the
I saw that same one, yeah.
Which is encouraging for Jermichael Finley, not just for fantasy owners, but just for his long-term health and that for his family as well. And then the last significant injury we had in Week 7 was Jay Cutler and his torn groin. We did torn groin, that just sounds terrible. We did touch on this a few seconds ago, but you did say that this doesn't really impact Brandon Marshall as much as it impacts Alshon Jeffrey. I would have to agree with that. So now we move on to our stellar performers and our Josh Freemans of Week 7. And everyone, as we all noticed on Monday night, Josh Freeman is a terrible NFL quarterback. So from now on, everything that is terrible and bad with this world will be referred to as Josh Freeman. So our stellar performers of Week 7, Josh, go ahead and lead us off.
My first stellar performer of this week is going to be Roy Halou.
Nice.
Roy Halou gets 11 carries for 41 yards and shocking 3 touchdown performance. And nobody expected this. I'm an Alfred Morris owner in one of my leagues, and it just tore me apart to see this.
Yep. That was some Shanahanigans, if you know.
Yes, he's up to his Shanahanigans again.
Yes, he is. Okay, I guess I'll give you one of my stellar performers. That'll be the man, Andrew Luck. 228 yards passing, 4 total touchdowns, 3 through the air and 1 on the ground for 29 points in ESPN Standard Leagues. Jay!
My second stellar performer is going to be Harry Douglas. Harry Douglas was looking to step in for the injured and out for the rest of the season, Julio Jones, and Roddy White's also missing some action as well. Mm-hmm. Harry Douglas, 7 receptions, 149 yards, and a touchdown. Targeted 7 times and caught all 7 balls. What a marvelous performance by Harry Douglas.
Harry Douglas, my second stellar performer is at the running back position. My man, Ryan Matthews, his second straight 100-yard game, had 110 yards, 1 TD, and 19 points. He is not the only good running back for the Chargers. He is Ryan Matthews. Jay, let's hear it.
No, he's not. And Jake Locker is going to top off my stellar performers today. 25 of 41, 326 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns against a San Francisco 49ers defense that would typically shut down an offense like the Tennessee Titans. He did have 29 yards on the ground. Jake Locker is a mobile quarterback, so perhaps maybe he can get you those rushing yards and perhaps a rushing TD as well.
Yep. And my final stellar performer of week number 7 is Eric Decker. Has his own reality television show. Did you know that?
I did know that.
Okay, fine. Try to impress you. Okay, but Eric Decker, 8 catches, 150 yards, and 1 touchdown. He actually could have had 2 more touchdowns. He got tackled at the 1-yard line on 1 play, and then dropped a pretty tough touchdown catch on another play. Could have been an even bigger day for a guy that scored 21 points. Eric Decker is my final stellar performer of week 7. Now, going into our Josh Freemans of week 7, these are the guys that played pathetically bad when they should have not. So, Josh, your first Josh Freeman of week 7. Let's hear it.
My first Josh Freeman of this very first episode is going to be C.J. Spiller. Only 6 carries, 11 yards.
11 yards.
Not even a touchdown. I mean, This guy has just been so disappointing this season, and I just do not feel confident in starting him anymore. Just go ahead and just take him from here, man.
I would not feel confident either. My first Josh Freeman of week 7 is Tom Brady. Another bad performance from Mr. Brady. But fortunately for him, he gets to go home to a smoking hot wife. Tom Brady, 228 yards through the air and only 1 measly touchdown. Josh, let's hear it. Number 2.
Deshaun Jackson is actually going to be my number 2 Josh Freeman of the week. 3 receptions, 21 yards, 0 touchdown, 2 points in ESPN Standard Leagues. And just, it's just abysmal.
I will call your eagle and raise you another eagle. LaShawn McCoy is my Josh Freeman of week 7. 18 carries, 55 yards, and only 6 catches for 26 yards and no TDs. He got the touches, just didn't do anything with them. Josh?
So Tony Romo's going to top off the list this week, 28 of 47. He did top 300 yards passing, did get a touchdown through the air, but despite all that, he did throw 2 interceptions, and in standard leagues only accumulated 14 points this week. So usually he's a 20-point guy. So I'm a little disappointed in him this week.
Okay, and my final Josh Freeman week 7 is at the wide receiver position. Another guy that was in my starting lineup this week, Mr. Victor Cruz, only had 5 catches for 50 yards. The only touchdown that Eli Manning threw was to
Ruben Randall.
Ruben Randall, indeed. Victor Cruz just did not get the targets in this game. He actually dropped a touchdown pass. So hopefully Victor Cruz will turn it around. So, speaking of guys that have played like Josh Freeman, how about the terrible running backs of the 2013 campaign? Let's go and start off with MJD. Terrible, Josh.
Oh gosh, that whole entire offense is just
it's brutal.
It's just rough.
It just makes me want to vomit.
It's poor. It's so poor that, MJD, they get behind so fast that they can't run, they can't do anything on the ground anymore because their offense is so bad.
Yep. And so do you think MJD his lack of performance is more so based on the fact that he plays on a bad offense, or is MJD maybe on his decline? What do you think?
Probably a little bit of both. I
Yeah.
mean, if he can get going again and, start producing little by little and just increase his performances little by little, then maybe he'll be on the rise, but just a little bit of both right now.
Yeah, and he also is a guy that's coming off-season foot surgery, so I don't know if that's having any type of impact on the way he cuts or runs.
Perhaps.
So our second running back bust of 2013 is Mr. Ray Rice, who's been abysmal. He was once the guy to have, and now he's the guy you do not want to have, Jay.
Yeah, I even own him in a PPR league, and
why?
Even in a PPR league, he hasn't been productive whatsoever, and it's really tearing me apart because Ray Rice is a guy that you must own in a PPR league.
Yeah, and unlike MJD, I do think Ray Rice is still Ray Rice, but maybe it's the offense, maybe it's Joe Flacco. I don't know what's going on with him.
He's the guy that lose Anquan Bolden and Dennis Pitta in the season. So.
And Rice also did suffer a hip injury about 3 weeks ago, so I don't know if that has any lingering effects, but perhaps it could. And then number 3 on the running back bust list is Mr. Doug Martin, who did suffer a torn labrum, but either way, healthy or not, he just hasn't been that good.
Not at all. The Bucks right now started off the season 0-7, and Greg Schiano, I don't know what direction he's having that offense head in. So, and Mike Glennon, they parted ways with Josh Freeman, and Vincent Jackson seemed like the only valuable offensive asset over there. So,
I have to agree. And actually, in our Weekend Warriors Fantasy Football League, the number 1 overall pick, and keep in mind this is a keeper league. But the number 1 overall pick was none other than Trent Richardson, who's been just bad, flat out bad, Jay.
Just terrible. I mean, I don't even know how much more I can elaborate on. In our league, he was the number 1 overall pick, probably a little overhyped.
I think that was a little bit too cute. What do you think?
Too
Trent number
way
1?
Too cute.
Yeah, I think that was overly cute.
Taking Trent Richardson over LaShawn McCoy, Jamal Charles, proven backs that have proven themselves. Marshawn Lynch. I mean, those guys have gotten theirs over time, and just despite the injury to Jamal Charles, I mean, you got to stick with Jamal Charles regardless.
I mean, who would pass over beast mode Marshawn Lynch? Okay, number 5 on our list is C.J. Spiller. Man, he has been bad. And he's been bad all season long. He was a guy at the end of last season, got the starting job about midway through last season, and he just exploded. He was a dual threat, catching passes. He was making runs, scoring touchdowns, and he's been a shadow of himself in 2013.
Yeah, he has a little bit injury prone. Last season, he did suffer an injury after he did take over the starting job mid-season. I believe two games later. And this season, the ankle injury, I guess it's been lingering around. Fred Jackson's seems like he's the guy in Buffalo.
Yeah. And then, the last guy that we decided was, a running back bust this year was David Wilson, who was a first round draft pick, I think, in our league and in quite a few other leagues around the country. David Wilson has been injured, but even when he's healthy, he's just been really, really bad. Hasn't been productive at all, especially in that offense, which has been bad all around.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, it's bad. David Wilson, he loses. I don't even know if he's going to be the starter in New York anymore. I think that they might even part ways with him. They spent a first round pick on him. Suffers the injury. Has a big case of fumbling a lot. And he's not very protective of the ball at all. So
yes, and this year was the worst time for Andre Brown to go down. He would have been what most people think a huge fantasy asset if he would have stayed healthy. So now we're going to talk about some waiver wire pickups that you may have missed out on in weeks prior. Josh, the first one we have is Jarrett Boykin, stepped in for the injured Randall Cobb. He's owned in only 1.6% of ESPN fantasy leagues. Josh, what do you think about Boykin?
Boykin impressed me really this week because he put up He put up a 20-point performance in standard leagues, and that,
Yep.
that's usually. Now, I believe it was 16. I believe.
Yeah.
Don't quote me. But anyway, I think he's going to be valuable. He's got Aaron Rodgers throwing to him, so regardless of who steps in, Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback. Just keep that in mind. So I think you can rely on any wide receiver at this point.
And Rodgers is a lot like Peyton Manning. He is the chef of that offense. So he makes sure everyone gets fed, whether it's Boykin, whether it's James Jones, Jermichael Finley. He actually finds a way to get guys involved. Next name we have is Jordan Reed, the beast tight end out of the University of Florida. He is only owned in 4% of leagues, and he blew up this week for the Redskins.
He did. He had 9 receptions for 134 yards. PPR guys, it looks like he's going to be a valuable asset going forward.
Yep.
For standard leagues, 100 yards and a touchdown you can rely on every week.
Yes, and Jordan Reed, former basketball player, Josh, we have noticed that some of the best tight ends in football now come from that basketball background.
Yeah, Jimmy Graham,
Antonio Gates, Jordan Cameron.
Gates,
Yep.
Jordan Cameron.
Julius Thomas.
Yeah, Julius Thomas as well. And
Yeah.
it looks like we're seeing more of a hybrid now in these tight ends. They're really athletic guys that can really go up there and grab those balls.
Indeed. Okay, so Doug Martin went down. That means someone has to step in for him. That guy would be Mike James, owned in 0.1% of ESPN fantasy leagues. He is going to be a hot pickup this week, Jay.
Maybe hot. Definitely to fill in any. For those of you, for those bigger leagues out there, definitely a fill-in for any.
Yes,
any
maybe a
spots
bye
that
week
you
fill-in.
get into.
Yeah. The next name is a guy that was actually outscored Adrian Peterson on Monday night. I hate to say this, and it really just breaks me inside, but Peyton Hillis. I mean, come on, this guy's still in the league. He's owned in 1.9% of ESPN fantasy leagues. I don't know what to make of this, Jay, but I guess he's worth picking up.
At this point in time, it looks like he's the only valuable running back in New York. Who knows who's the next man up besides Peyton Hillis? So.
Yeah. I believe Hillis is the 5th or 6th string running back, so they are desperate for some production behind Eli Manning in the backfield. Let's see. Next guy we have is Zach Stacy. And Josh, this guy has been a starting NFL running back for the Rams for 3 weeks, and he is still only owned in 10.2% of ESPN fantasy leagues. What are people thinking, Jay? Come on.
I don't know. I really don't. That really surprises me as well. Zach Stacy, I mean, he's he's in a Rams offense, but I think he's still worthy of a flex play for sure.
And he did score a short touchdown in week 7.
He did. It's the first of the season, I believe.
Yes, and then the last guy we have is Chris Ivory, who got 32 carries in week 7, was able to get only 102 yards. 34 carries for about $1.04, I believe. He is only owned in 15% of ESPN fantasy leagues. Josh, is Chris Ivory, is he worth spending a roster spot on at this point?
I say no because, I mean, they do have Bilal Powell there still.
Yes. But keep in mind, Jay, that the Jets spent a 4th-round pick in order to trade for this guy. So I would think he would get some opportunities, but I don't know if he's that good.
You would think, and I think the Patriots' run defense, I think that was just the Patriots' run defense just being terrible.
Yeah. All right.
They lost Vince Wilfork,
yes,
so yeah.
Yes, true, very true. Okay, so that'll do it for Waiver Wire Talk for Week 8. Now we go into everyone's favorite segment, the name game. So in the name game, I'm going to pick 1 quarterback, 1 running back, and 1 wide receiver, and compare that person to 3 other names, and Jay will let me know which guy he prefers. So Jay, are you down to do a Phillip Rivers name game?
Let's do it. Let's go.
Okay. All right. So Jay, all of these will be for the rest of the season. Keep in mind. So for the rest of the season, will you take Phillip Rivers or Andrew Luck? Now keep in mind, Luck did lose Wayne, for what it's worth.
He did, and he also lost to Wayne Allen as well.
Yes.
I'm gonna have to go with Phillip Rivers, honestly.
Okay,
because
Phillip Rivers.
Phillip Rivers, he's got more of a lot more offensive weapons.
Yes, the Phillip Rivers renaissance continues. Okay, Phillip Rivers or Matt Ryan?
Matt Ryan.
Okay. I think he proved in week 7 that regardless of who's catching his passes, he's going to put up numbers. Okay. Phillip Rivers or Russell Wilson?
I'm gonna go Russell Wilson. They have a better backfield in Marshawn Lynch, and Marshawn Lynch's gonna be able to provide the yardage on the ground, get him close quarters, and they do have some receivers, and then they also have Percy Harvin coming back from injury. So
very true. Very true. But I kind of feel like Russell Wilson is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Either the Seahawks run the ball a lot and Marshawn Lynch goes off for 2 touchdowns, or Wilson goes off. I feel like it's not both. It's one or the other, it seems like.
That's a good point. Very good point.
All right. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think I'd still feel more comfortable with Russell Wilson.
Okay. All right, let's move on to a Trent Richardson name game. Okay, so Richardson or Ryan Matthews for the rest of the season?
I'm going to say Ryan Matthews.
Okay, why is that?
Ryan Matthews, I just think the injury to Reggie Wayne to the Indianapolis Colts will have such a big effect. Donald Brown's getting more carries.
True.
And I just think that the Chargers are going to start relying on Ryan Matthews a little more. They seem like they're putting more trust into him.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Trent Richardson or BenJarvus Green-Ellis?
I'm going to have to go Trent Richardson. BenJarvus Green-Ellis, Giovanni Bernard. I don't know how the Bengals plan on utilizing both backs for the rest of the season. It seems to me that the Colts offense is a little more reliable within the running game, the running back situation there.
Yes. Green-Ellis may be the goal line guy, but it kind of feels like there's been a shift in the touches in Cincinnati. And I kind of feel like Giovanni Bernard is slowly but surely taking over the majority of those, but maybe, it's just me. So Trent Richardson or Le'Veon Bell?
I'm going to go Le'Veon Bell on this one. The Steelers offense, it seems like they're finally getting going. 2 straight wins. He is the goal line back regardless. He's probably their every down back as well.
Yeah.
Catches out of the backfield.
There's not many of those, yep.
No, not at all.
Okay, let's move on to a Harry Douglas name game. Harry Douglas exploded in week 7. Harry Douglas or Alshon Jeffrey?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yes, indeed.
Very tough one. Just despite the quarterback situation in Chicago, I'm going to go with Harry Douglas. Matt Ryan, Matt Ryan's a more prolific quarterback, of course.
Right.
We all know who Matt Ryan is. He's going to get his numbers.
Yeah.
Harry Douglas seems to be a proven wide receiver, yet he's not as good as Alshon Jeffrey, but we just don't know what's going to happen in Chicago there.
Very true, and no more Jay Cutler, like you said. Harry Douglas or Eric Decker?
Eric Decker, hands down. You have a quarterback in Peyton Manning. For those PPR guys out there, I think Eric Decker is going to be worthy of a worthy asset regardless. He's going to get his yardage. He's going to get his receptions.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Eric Decker right there.
Right. Okay. Harry Douglas or Mike Wallace?
Wow. I'm going to say Harry Douglas. Mike Wallace, he's really, I don't know if he's really shocked you this season at all.
Yeah.
He's been a deep threat guy. He's pretty much been a deep threat guy his whole life, his whole career.
Yep.
So I'm going to say Harry Douglas.
I would have to agree with you on that. And on that note, Jay, that'll conclude the first episode of the Late Round Sleeper Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. We will see you on Saturday. Good luck in Week 8. Next episode will feature a Week 8 preview and also a start-sit section as well. You can also follow us on Twitter at LateRDSleeper. That is on Twitter at LateRDSleeper. Send us start-sit questions, any questions pertaining to fantasy football, and we will answer them on Saturday's show. So thanks for listening. Jay, sign us out.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.